Voice matters, voice matters. Welcome, voice friends, to another episode of Interviews on Voice Matters. Today, I'm very proud to introduce and talk with Bodo Maass, who is in Germany, correct?
Yes.
This is a very exciting interview for me because Bodo is the founder and main software developer of Cyget Software, which produces Voce Vista, which is a spectrogram program that we use for analyzing voice. And I use it almost every day with clients. And I've learned a ton from the process, and just getting to talk with somebody behind the scenes like this is really, really kind of thrilling. And I hope everyone gets something from this interview. So welcome, Bodo.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time to do this. So the big question for everyone to start out is, how did you get involved in voice? And specifically for you, how did you get involved with voice and technology? How did that start for you?
I've always liked singing. So even as a child, I was singing in a choir and things like that. And at some point in my life, I discovered overtone singing, which is a way of singing two tones at the same time. At least that's how it was presented. I mean, it's really something else. But originally I thought, wow, this is really cool. I have to learn this. And I was able to figure it out on my own to a certain point. And then I got stuck there, and I didn't know what to do because I didn't know anyone who was also doing this. And eventually I discovered that there are actually people teaching this. So I discovered Wolfgang Saus, who's an overtone singing teacher in Germany, and I immediately signed up for his classes. And I was also one of his first students to do his year-long training in overtone singing.
Wow.
Which was exactly 20 years ago, 2003. And there, in one of the first meetings of this training, he said, it would be really nice to have some software to help people to understand how overtone singing works and to visualize the sound, and then I can show them how the overtones relate to each other. And I said, well, I'm a software programmer, I know how to do that. So I was I locked myself away for a weekend and wrote a prototype, which was kind of what he wanted, because he said he looked at the existing spectrogram software programs that were available at the time, and none of them could really do what he wanted. They were all very scientifically and totally unusable for musicians. And none of them had any concept of overtones or harmonics or something. So they were just presenting the raw sound. So anyway, I wrote a prototype and showed it to him, and he was really excited and say, wow, this is super useful. And and so that was the foundation. The first prototype was really just a very quick one-off thing that barely worked for what we wanted. And so over the Christmas vacation of that year, I rewrote the whole thing in a cleaner way, according to, now that he saw that there's a possibility to do this, something like this, he sent me a long list of, like, I think his email was, don't get bored over the holidays. I have this long list of ideas that I need you to put into this program. And then we met again in January, where he was giving a concert in a cave near where I live. He's doing this every year, at least he used to. And then we met, because we don't live in the same town, but I came to this cave concert and he had seen my program and he was really excited. And and that's how it then became a full-blown project, because I realized if I just do it as a side project or kind of a weekend deal, it will never get anywhere where I want it to be. So eventually I reduced my job to part-time. And then I saw it's still not enough time to work on that project. So eventually I quit my job completely. And now I'm fully self-employed just doing this. And I've been doing that for 15 years now.
Wow. So back up a second. How did you first get introduced to overtone singing? What happened there?
I think my very first introduction was a German radio show about that, which was about another German overtone singer who was giving concerts and who also has his own overtone singing choir. And they were presenting it as this weird mystical way of monks chanting, and you need years of meditation and practice to do something like this, which of course is not really true. I can teach that to you in 20 minutes, as you know.
Yes.
But at the time I was fascinated by that, and at the same time, in the same year, one of my friends showed me, hey, I have this really cool thing that I can do. And that was also overtone singing. So it was coming to me from multiple sources at the same time. But as I said, it took me another like 10 years until I discovered that there are teachers in that field and that it's not just something that I can do like at a very basic level by myself.
That was incredible. And for a little background, I got to work with you this summer on some overtone singing live in person, which was incredible. And by the way, I've been practicing a lot, so I can't wait to show you
Ah, cool.
what I've been working on sometime. But yeah, that's incredible. And so there are all kinds of layers of connections here. Like one of the layers of connections is your connection to Donald Miller,
Yes.
correct?
So my originally, when I was just working with Wolfgang Saus, like originally we just presented it for overtone singers, which of course it's a very niche application and it's a very limited scope of people that have an interest in that. And then I showed it to singing teachers and they were interested in that and said like, why don't you go to these voice conferences and show it to a wider audience? In fact, no, I think Wolfgang originally wanted to present it at the PAS, the Physiology of the Acoustics and Singing Voice conference in
Mm-hmm.
York. And
Mm-hmm.
I was living in Oxford at the time. So, and then Wolfgang said, "Oh, I can't make that. Why don't you do the presentation there?" And then and that was run by David Howard and his associates. And so they had me do the presentation for this, and I think that was 2006, and I was kind of scared and intimidated about presenting this because I had no idea. Like we have this program for overtone singers, and then Wolfgang wants to show it to a wider audience of non-overtone people, but it worked really well. I was singing in front um, of the whole conference and then showed them the various things that we could do with the program at that time. And there was Sundberg there who commented on my overtone singing and that he found it fascinating that I tune the upper harmonics to be like perfectly tuned with the melody. And then I had to have the foundation had to be out of tune so that the upper harmonics match. And he could pick that up immediately. And so that was funny. But yeah, at the time, and that was also the first time where I met Donald Miller because he went to all the conferences. And then 2 years later, I was in Austria at the Austrian Voice Conference or something. And people said, why don't you guys work together? Like Don is doing Voce Vista and that's kind of his life work. And eventually he needs somebody to take that over. And you're basically doing the same thing. So why don't you two guys kind of do it work together. And I went to Don and said, look, why don't we cooperate in some way? And he was originally kind of unsure. I mean, Don is not a programmer. He always had, like originally he had Richard Horn do the original Voce Vista with him. And then they said, well, can you add video to our original Voce Vista? And I talked to Richard Horn and I told him how I would do it. And he said, well, the program isn't really made for that. And I'm not sure. I've never worked with this. And I don't think it's going to work. And I said, okay, well, I have my own platform and I can do it with this. And then so Don's idea was to add video to Voce Vista, and hence we called it Voce Vista Video. And then we actually
Gotcha.
had a fully working prototype of Voce Vista with video, even 10 years or even 13 years ago. But and then people said we need a Mac version, and then lots of other things came up. So embarrassingly, even now the Voce Vista thing isn't really finished yet. The video support has always been on the back burner for the last few years, but I promise to have it ready pretty soon, hopefully.
That's really cool. So can you give the audience a little idea of who Donald Miller was?
So he's an incredible guy, actually. He was a professional singer and voice teacher for a whole like lifetime of a professional career. And then in his 60s, he discovered computers. And
Mm.
and then he's an American, but he was living in Holland. And as far as I understand it, he went to the University of Groningen and did his PhD there. And I hope that is correct. There might be some factual errors in there, but I know he lived in Groningen later on and he did something there. So he did his PhD and then he pioneered the use of this visual feedback software for use in the singing context. And he really wanted to get people to use the computer to see the signal and understand what they're doing in a kind of objective way. And he was putting this forward to an audience of classical singers. So while we were coming from overtone singing, where we play with the sound and make the overtones louder and quieter in a very playful way for fun. The classical singers are basically doing the same thing, but they're doing it to achieve their classical technique. So they're not thinking of it as overtone singing, but rather of their singing technique and of how they tune it, their resonances and stuff. And before the feedback software came into play, this was all very intuitive and possibly not very objective. And they say you need to make your sound larger or brighter, change the color. And so basically, as a student, you have to trust your teacher that the feedback you get from them is kind of helping you to improve. And using the feedback software makes the whole thing verifiable. So the teacher can say, well, I hear all these things in your sound, but I can also show it to you. Because if you do this, this happens here. And if you do that, that happens here. And you don't have to take my word for it because you can see it right there and try it out for yourself. And that's a real step forward in building trust between the teacher and the student, if the student is open to this kind of visual information. Not all of them are, but for some people, this is really helpful.
Yeah, that's
And
what I've found. Like, go ahead.
yeah, and so Don was always, and he was also very interested in studying the vocal techniques of great opera singers. And so he was just looking at the visualization of their voice and then figuring out what is their resonance strategy, what is their technique to achieve the sound that they have. And he could look at that with his original Voce Vista and then study it and explain what exactly their resonance strategy is. And that led to his book, Resonance in Singing, where he compares all these great singers and then tries to explain how they use their voice to achieve their sound. And Don went to all the voice conferences that existed and presented his work. And so it was kind of impossible not to run across him if you were in the voice community in any way.
That's incredible. So just for people who don't know what your program does, can you very quick or in a brief way explain what we're going to look at? And we're not looking at that today. I understand that. We definitely need to meet another time so we can do some visual representations of the program. But how would you explain what the purpose of the program is?
At a very basic level, it shows you which frequencies are in your sound and how loud are they. So, and that's basically what a spectrum does. But we present it in a way that is accessible to musicians. So it doesn't just say this is the raw like structure of your sound, but you can relate it to the piano keyboard and the musical notes, and then there's a lot of stuff also to relate it to the vowels that you hear when you produce a sound. So it's kind of very geared towards singing. And not just a raw spectrogram, which you can find in many other programs as well. But so the basic idea would just be that if you imagine a piano keyboard and then you have a bar chart which shows how loud each frequency pertaining to each key is. And
The
so
harmonic.
yeah, so you could say for any given sound, you might get a distribution of energy along the piano keyboard where some keys have a lot of energy, so you get a very tall bar, and others have none, and there's nothing there. And that would lead you to get a picture of saying, okay, there's a lot of energy at this frequency or at this musical note, and then at these other points as well. And then if the sound changes, then this distribution will change. So the spectrum shows you the instantaneous distribution of energy across your spectrum, say which frequencies are loud at this point in time, and then the spectrogram shows you how this changes over time. That's a technical explanation. So for some people that might not make any sense, and of course we have to show how it looks like, but in a nutshell, that's how I would explain it.
And I think one of the best examples of this are the videos that Anna Maria has done. How do you say her last name properly?
Hefele.
Hefele? Okay.
Yeah.
So for those of you who have not seen or are living under a rock, there are some Overtone singing videos. I had no idea that you were behind this, but learned from you this summer that you were part of that video project. And honestly, I'll put a link to her videos in the description of this interview so that you can go look for yourself. But some of the best explanation for harmonics and overtone singing ever. Could you talk a little bit about your involvement with that project?
Well, she made an original video where she was just recording herself in front of a screen without any visualization, and we're friends. So when I saw the video, I said we should do a version of this where we show the spectrogram, and then she recorded some extra speech to explain the things that we see when there's the spectrogram, and then I put it all together so that we have her original video footage together with the spectrogram where we show in detail what the different parts of the sound do. So how she modulates the fundamental and the overtones. And then she does some really advanced moves where she changes both. Like originally she has these steps where she just does an alternating fundamental on two tones, but goes through a scale, an ascending and descending scale on the overtones, which is already pretty incredible. And then she can keep the harmonics or the overtone line constant, but change the fundamental. So, and in otherwise, that's all in the video. So if you haven't seen this before, then it's probably hard to understand, but it's really quite simple once you um, think about it a little bit. And Voce Vista has these things called overtone sliders, which are exactly for that, to visualize the relations between the fundamental and the overtone, so that you always know. So if my fundamental is 100 hertz, for example, then the harmonics are always whole multiples of that. So the fifth overtone would be 5 times 100 hertz, and the sixth one 6 times 100 hertz. And so conversely, if you want a certain frequency to be your harmonic, then you know which are the eligible fundamentals for that. And these are the kind of things that she explores in the video at a very expert level of overtone singing.
So again, tell us what your involvement with that was. You just said what it is, but
well, I did all the visualizations. So I created the spectrograms and the overtone slider relations, and did all the video editing to do the final video. So that was actually my first major video editing project, which took me quite a long time.
and well worth it, because what is it, over 25 million views at this point?
That's
Something like that?
that's original one. The one with the spectrograms is probably 1.5 million or something. So it's not quite as popular, but then people who appreciate this level of detail definitely think it's a cool video and a helpful explanation.
Oh yeah, I think it's done the voice education world one of the biggest services, honestly, because harmonics and informants and all of these things are just some of the hardest concepts to grasp. Wouldn't you agree?
Sadly, that is true. It's really quite a simple concept, but I see that many um, even highly educated voice people don't fully appreciate the distinction between these things. So yeah, we need to have more education along these lines so that everybody has a sure understanding of what these concepts mean and what the difference is.
Yes. And so I remember the first time I saw my voice on a spectrogram program, probably in 2008 or so. And I had no idea what I was visualizing or what was going on, but it was one of the coolest moments of my singing life. Do you
Mhm.
remember the first moment that you saw your voice visualized through one of these types of programs?
Yes, I actually downloaded a Spectrum program, and probably like 5 years or so before I got involved in that sort of thing. And that was not a spectrogram, just a spectrum, and it was quite coarse. So, I mean, it was kind of doing what I thought it would do, but it was too crude to really be helpful. So I was actually kind of disappointed. I thought, okay, that's not quite as helpful as I thought it would be. And then I tried it once or twice and then forgot about it again. And then And now, of course, I use Voce Vista in my own singing lessons when I do singing lessons as a student, and my teacher is a big fan and one of the first users of Voce Vista, and we always have it running, and I can immediately see when I like how a certain exercise went and if I achieved what my teacher wanted me to do. So I can now quite fluently read my own voice in the spectrogram.
That's incredible. And that leads to, a future question. How do you see, or where do you see the voice science world going in general, especially with this type of technology um, becoming more prevalent?
Well, there's a difference if you mean voice science in as in academics, or
Mm,
if you mean the practical side of teachers and students. And
practical side.
these are not the same things. So academics want something that is easy to access for everyone, and just they probably use something like Prat, which is incredibly powerful, but not really geared towards a streamlined practical usage. So people would say it's not as user friendly as some other programs, but it can probably do everything you can think of and then some more. Um,
And you're speaking about the program PRAAT, Pratt.
right, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it either. Originally it's Dutch, so who knows?
Sorry. I'm butchering
Um,
that, I'm sure.
so the voice scientists might use that or some other, but some use Voce Vista. And Voce Vista is geared towards being practical and easy to use and of course we aim to be scientifically accurate and correct as well, but it doesn't have as many deep analytical capabilities as some of the more academically geared softwares. Um, the question how I see this being
And
done.
what are the implications for this type of technology in the practical voice studio? Because think about it. Historically, we have had no, like you said, no feedback and a lot of descriptors and trying things out. But now we have these new technologies coming in, and I just see them as fundamentally shifting how we teach and how we learn. And I'm assuming that you have some insights into that the rest of us don't, because you're looking at this, you're working with this program all the time.
Well, people that are open to this technology, I think it really deepens their understanding of what sound is and how the voice works. And when I talk to some older singing teachers, and I remember once I had a conversation with maybe a 75-year-old singing teacher, and she asked me what I did, and I explained it to her, and she looked at me like really in a sorry kind of way, like, well, I'm sorry, but what you're doing is a complete waste of time because who would possibly need that? A good singing teacher hears everything and there's absolutely no need for anything else. So she really, yeah, she felt sorry for me, I think, because in her mind that was totally pointless what I did. But if I see people who really embrace the technology and find it useful, then they learn something. And even singing teachers who say, I heard everything before, of course, but now I have an objective verification of what I heard and I can show it to the student. And I also have a much deeper understanding of it myself. And that's certainly something that I learned for myself, that I have a much deeper and more precise understanding of how sound works and how the voice works. And so for people who are open to this kind of stuff, I think it will really deepen their understanding. And that's where I see the value of it.
Yeah, agreed. And okay, so I want to back up a second and go back to something I read on your bio, that you have a background in psychology and cognitive science.
Yes, I
Um,
studied psychology and philosophy at University of Oxford, mainly because I wanted to get into cognitive science, and I could do that through this program at this university.
how has that woven itself into your career?
I always leaned into computer simulations of the mind and artificial intelligence, or what it was at the time. So so immediately after university, I started to work as a software engineer, and then that led into doing what I do now, which is still being a software engineer, but coming back to the field of music, which I also really liked all the time, which I have always liked also.
That's incredible. There's so much to talk about. And I think what I want to do is meet another time so that you can demonstrate the software for us too. So now that we've met you a little bit, hopefully getting people interested in going to the website and checking it out,
Mhm.
and uh, starting to think about these things a little bit deeper. And like I said, I'll put a link to Anna Maria's stuff and your website for your company. And just really quick, how can people find you if they're looking for more information on you, Overtone Singing, some of your favorite resources?
Well, what I have is mostly on my website, sygyt.com, sygyt.com. And I have video tutorials, and so that also links to my YouTube channel, where I hope to have more content soon, which also explores topics of sound, but also talks about how to use the software. So sygyt.com is definitely the starting point, and then from there, possibly my YouTube channel.
Okay, great. And you've dropped a ton of resources in terms of teachers and what's going on in the Overtone world for sure. So, would it be okay to get together again soon and go through some of the program itself and show us some of the magic that you create with visualizing sound?
Sure.
Okay, great. Very good. All right. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.